Hey guys, welcome back, and this is episode. Jeez, this is episode 4 already of this year back. So, last video I did forget to mention about two things. I forgot to mention the Who's album, Tommy, which was the first rock opera, and I did not know that Led Zeppelin 2 came out in 1969. I thought it was 1970. So sorry about that. Uh, so yeah, so this is the 70s now. And yeah, so first thing, I'll start by the blurriness. It's just a screen recorder. Like, I've tried, so it says I'm like a 280p, something like that. But every time I go to switch it, it just still just keeps going back. So I don't know what's up with that. And so I am going to start looking for a new one to replace this. So just bear with me. Like, so it's not that bad, but you know you can still make out that's Jimi Hendrix, stuff like that. But it's just a little blurriness. Basically, it's just what filming was like when YouTube was created, so yeah, throwback. Okay, so this is where we left off last time. We left off at Woodstock, which is probably the last major thing that happened in 1969 in like the rock point of view. So 1970 starts, and yes, I did put in these little like timeline things to kind of help you to figure out what year it is. So 1970 starts, and so a couple new bands come on the scene. You have Black Sabbath, which, you know, has songs like Paranoid, War Pigs, Iron Man, and also Ozzy Osbourne's lead singer. Also, Alice Cooper releases his first album, but also the Beatles break up. Also, also that year uh, Edgar Win- the Edgar Winter group starts. They have the hit Frankenstein, and Elvis switches to wearing jumpsuits at his shows. So yeah. Also this year, the Eagles have released their first album. You know, the Eagles had lots of big hits like Hotel California, which we will talk about later, A Heartache Tonight, Victim of Love, Life in the Fast Lane. Then also the band Sweet released their first album. They have hits like Little Willie, Action. Uh, they also had hits like Ballroom Blitz, um, and probably the most famous one. They also have Teenage Rampage, but the most famous one as of 2020 is probably the song Fox on the Run, which it was featured in the movie Guardians of the Galaxy. So also, rock had two major losses in 1970. They were Jimi Hendrix of a drug overdose, and Janis Joplin of, oh yeah, you guessed it, a drug overdose. Also in 1970, two albums were released. Those were Led Zeppelin 3 and George Harrison, All Things Must Pass, which was his first solo album since leaving the Beatles. So 1971 comes, and Jim Morrison dies up drug overdose, of course. That's kind of the trend going on at that time. And the Doors have to stop performing. Also, a couple big album came out this year. It was The Who, Who's Next. It featured songs like Won't Get Fooled Again, Bargain, My Wife, Behind Blue Eyes, and but Won't Get Fooled Again, and probably the other big song was Baba O'Reilly. Baba O'Reilly is commonly mistaken as Teenage Wasteland, but it's called Baba O'Reilly. Just look it up. Also, the Rolling Stones had a big album come out, and that album was Sticky Fingers, and it featured the song Brown Sugar. Also this year, the band Aerosmith made their first appearance, and Led Zeppelin released Led Zeppelin 4. And also ELO made their first appearance. So ELO is most famous as of 2020 for the song Mr. Blue Sky. Mr. Blue Sky was featured in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Some other notable songs or Don't Bring Me Down, and Evil Woman. Also, Billy Joel released his first album that year too. If you don't know who Billy Joel is, oh jeez. So Billy Joel, he has a lot of famous songs, Piano Man. His most famous one as a 2020, or most recognizable one, is probably We Didn't Start the Fire. Also, and also in this year too, also he had a lot of songs like You Might Be Right, It's So Rock and Roll to Me, Pressure, I Go to Extremes, uh, Big Shot, uh, Only the Good Die Young. So yeah. Also, this year, Paul McCartney formed the band The Wings. And then I have hits like Live and Let Die, Band on the Run, High, 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 Jet, Junior's Farm, and a couple other ones. So 1972 comes, and the Rolling Stones released the album Exile on Main Street. Alice Cooper releases the album Schools Out, and that's pretty much it. That's all I could pretty much find for that year. So 1973 rolls around, and Blue Oyster Cult makes their first appearance. So Blue Oyster Cult, the probably most known, the most known song is probably, oh my gosh, Don't Fear the Reaper, and it's probably well known as a 2020 because thanks to SNL's skits, the more cowbell skits. They also had a lot of other good songs like Godzilla, uh, Black Blade, Joan Crawford, Burning for You, and yeah. Also, in 1973, Elvis did his Aloha from Hawaii special. That would be his, well, it would be a big comeback for the performing scene. He would start touring and stuff soon after. And it was aired in 40 different countries and actually got more viewers than the moon landing. And it was actually a fundraiser too. Also in 1973, Pink Floyd. I'm not a big Pink Floyd guy. Like the only two albums I just know from is Dark Side of the Moon. Like I don't think I can name a song off of this album, but I do know the Wall, and that's it. Like I can just do comfortably numb, and Another Brick in the Wall, and that's all I know from them. But I do know this album is like when this came out, it was in the top 200 like selling albums like for the year and up to like the 1980s. It was in like the top 200, which is pretty impressive that people are still buying that album and still buying enough that it's in the top 200, which is 300, pretty impressive. Also, Ringo Starr released his, I guess, kind of iconic album called Ringo, and another big Beatles thing happened that year in 1973 is both the Blue and the Red album were released. The Blue and the Red album, they were kind of the Beatles' greatest hits. And also the band Lynyrd Skynyrd made the first appearance. The band Deep Purple released the album Machine Head, which had the song Smoke on the Water, which was probably the most famous song. And also the band Queen made their first appearance. Same with the band Montrose. Montrose, they had a big song called Rock Candy, but more importantly, the lead singer of the band his name was Sammy Hagar. And Sammy Hagar, if you don't know who he is, we'll talk about him next episode. But he is actually pretty famous for the song I Can't Drive 55, and for being the lead singer of Van Halen after David Lee Roth left. So 1974 rolls around, and Kiss makes their first appearance. And we're going to talk about a lot of them later. Also, the band Kansas makes their first appearance. Kansas was mostly famous for the song Carry On Wayward Son. And they also had other songs like Fight Fire with Fire, Play the Game Tonight. And they also had a really big album in 1977, which we'll get to later. The Who released the masterpiece, Quadrophenia. Well, that's what they say. I haven't really listened to it all the way yet, being a big Who fan. Ringo Starr released one of his most famous albums, Goodnight Vienna. And Queen released 2 albums this year. Those would have been Queen 2 and A Sheer Heart Attack. 1975 comes, and Bruce Springsteen has his first major hit with his album Born to Run. Journey gets their record deal and releases their first album. Led Zeppelin releases the album Physical Graffiti, and that's what reminds me that I thought that in 1973 Led Zeppelin released the album Houses of Holy, but for reasons I'm not going to show that. And also, Queen released another album called Night at the Opera, and 1976 comes. So now this is when so basically everything from here to 1979 is going to be very crazy. A lot of the bands that we're going to talk about is some that we already have will go on to dominate the late 70s and the 80s. And yeah. So starting in 1976, Kiss had the first major huge album with Destroyer, and this propelled Kiss to go up. This propelled Kiss to the top, and yeah, like hits off of here, you had Detroit Rock City, God of Thunder, Do You Love Me, Beth, and Shout It Out Loud, and the follow-up was somewhat better. It was somewhat good, not as good as Destroyer. But it's still a pretty iconic album, mostly for the album artwork. Rock and Roll Over. The biggest song for here is called Calling Dr. Love. Also this year in 1976, Boston made their first appearance. Boston's mostly known for the song More Than a Feeling. But on this album, like the whole album was a hit, and they had all songs off this album was Smokin', More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, Rock and Roll Band, Hitch a Ride, and lots of other ones. Also this year, a new kind of rock genre came out, and that was punk rock. And the leaders of this new kind of rock movement came out this year in 1976. Their name was the Ramones. The Ramones is probably one of my all-time favorite bands. And so they have hits like Blitzkrieg Bop, which is probably known as the Hey Ho, Let's Go song. They also had I Want to Be Sedated, Gina's a Punk Rocker, and Rock and Roll Radio, Rock and Roll High School, Baby It's You. Yeah, I think that's the end of the song, right? Yeah, I don't want to check, I'm too lazy to check. But yeah, they had lots of big songs. And Commando was a big one too. Also, we had making their debut was the band The Runaways. But you're like, why are we mentioning this band? I'm only mentioning them because there's 2 notable members in the band. Those 2 members are Lita Ford and Joan Jett. If you're a big rock fan, those names should ring a bell, I should say. And Joan Jett, it's lots of people know who she is. We'll get to them later, probably next episode. Also in 1976, the Eagles released probably the most iconic album, Hotel California, which I honestly don't know much about, so I'm sorry. And Led Zeppelin released the album Presence, which is just like the only reason why this album is even famous is because of that black object, which is literally just called The Object. And yeah, it like every picture in the album, that object is like there, like somewhere. And yeah. Also, Queen released another album called Day at the Races, and also an Australian rock band made their debut in 1976 with an album called High Voltage. That band was called AC/DC. And they also later that year had a good follow-up called Dirty Deeds, Done Dirt Cheap. So 1977 comes in, and right away Kiss comes out with the album Love Gun, which is probably one of Kiss's most famous albums. Not as famous as Destroyer, though. Love Gun had the hit Love Gun. All other hits were like Christine 16, I Stole Your Love, and Shock Me. Also, another band made it big this year too, in 1977. That band was Fleetwood Mac with the album Rumors. And also, The Clash debuted this year, in 1977, with the album just The Clash, self-titled. And it's known as the most bootlegged album because it was not released in the US. It was only released in the UK. And since so many people in the US like this punk kind of feeling, people like, hey, we can make some bucks just by bringing this album over and selling it on the black market, and that's what they did. So it's known as the most bootlegged album of all time. Also, the band Foreigner made their debut with the self-titled album Foreigner, so Foreigner had lots of hits. The probably most famous one is Jukebox Hero. They have other hits like I Wanna Know What Love Is in the 80s, Urgent, Cold-Blooded, Hot-Blooded, Cold as Ice, and and Double Vision. So yeah. Also, another guy came out this year with his own self-titled album again. His name was Eddie Money. Eddie Money he just died in 2019, and probably most famous for his song "Give Me Two Tickets to Paradise." He had a lot of other hits like "Walk on Water," and "Take Me Home Tonight." I Think I'm in Love, Shaken. Yeah, he had a lot of other hits. Also, I mentioned them earlier. The band Kansas came out with the album Point of No Return, which had the song Point of No Return, and is probably Kansas' most iconic album. It also had the song Dust in the Wind. Queen released the album News of the World. I would talk more about Queen, but I don't really know the albums. I don't really know much about Queen, because I have seen Bohemian Rhapsody, but I don't fully trust a biopic. They might just add stuff in there, just kind of excitement stuff. I don't know, but I don't really know how the albums went. But also, the band Styx finally made it big with the album called Grand Illusion, which had the song "Come Sail Away." If you don't know what that song is, I just can't help you. I'm sorry. Also this year, the band Cheap Trick debuted, and so Cheap Trick would have songs. Probably the most famous one is "Dream Police." I Want You to Want Me is another famous song, and also the Elvis cover "Don't Be Cruel." Also, the band Heart debuted this year with Heart. Probably most famous songs by Barracuda. They also have the song Magic Man, which is pretty famous. Crazy on You. Never Alone. What About Love? A lot of hits from them. But also, rock did have two major losses this year. The band Lynyrd Skynyrd got in a plane accident. And the lead singer and some other people died, and the band kind of unofficially retired, only to come back a couple years later. Only come back around 1979. Lynyrd Skynyrd came back. So throughout the 70s, Elvis was pretty, I guess, well, I don't want to say lively, but he really was still about. He worked a lot, had a lot of big hits, he had a lot of hits in the 70s, both on pop, rock, and country charts. He had a lot of albums, and he toured a lot too. So far by 1977, he basically he did like a 4-week show in Vegas, broke every Las Vegas record in those 4 weeks, which is pretty impressive. And I don't know if any of his records still hold today. I'm assuming not, but yeah. But also, in August 1977, he released his album Moody Blue. Moody Blue would have, well, the song Moody Blue in his own cover of Unchained Melody, and have one of his last major hits, Way Down, only after performing. So then after this was soon after this was released, he performed in Omaha, Nebraska in 1977, then performed one more show, went back to Graceland, only where he would go and die. Yeah. So then in 1977 Elvis died, and yeah. Okay, so then soon after Elvis died, there was a new kind of rock kind of genre coming out. Like so far you had punk, but this new one only lasts a couple years though. But this new genre kind of thing was called disco. Basically, what disco was, a whole bunch of people just kind of missed the kind of dance music of like the 60s and the 50s. So like, hey, let's try to make dance music. And so a lot of bands were actually a lot of bands are kind of like reluctant to do it at first, but they had a lot of like bands who were like up front and just solely made disco music. Like probably the most famous one was the Bee Gees, with "Staying Alive," "You Should Be Dancing." Other one was the Village People, uh, Earth, Wind and Fire, and ABBA, which is probably another one of the most famous ones. I'll just try to go back couple, if that's fine with you guys. So, I'll talk about Bee Gees. But, the Village People had hits like, is that, did they do We Are Family? I don't know. No, it's just a Sledge. Oh man, what did they do? Oh, I forgot. Okay, forget about them right now. Earth, Wind & Fire has the most popular song is September. But you have like Dancing Queen, SOS, Waterloo, Money, Take a Chance on Me, I Want a Man After Midnight. Yeah, they have hundreds. But yeah, but also to help fuel this, you had John Travolta and Saturday Night Fever. So yeah, so 1978 comes, and I said a lot of bands are kind of like reluctant to do disco, but some bands actually come out with disco albums, and probably the most famous band who tried to do one was Kiss with Dynasty, which we'll talk about later. So 1978 comes, and the band Boston releases their second album, Don't Look Back, which had the song Don't Look Back and other hits like Party and A Man I'll Never Be. The band The Cars released their first album called self-titled album, which had basically like the whole album is literally just on the greatest hits. Like it had songs like good, Let the Good Times Roll, My Best Friend's Girl, Just What I Needed, Don't You Stop, You All Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love, and All Mixed Up, and Moving Stereo. But yeah, basically the whole album was huge. Yeah. So then, also that year, a show called WKRP in Cincinnati aired, and it was so the show was by a radio station, and that's kind of played like elevator music, kind of like old, like kind of it was kind of like nowadays it would kind of like Josh Groban does that kind of music, but like 40 years ago. But but then they switched to like the top 40, and so in the background they have like Kiss posters, Elvis posters, stuff like that. But and but so throughout the show, there's always some kind of music playing in the background. But surprisingly, one of the songs they played was actually from not a well-known band. It wasn't that widely known yet, and the song was called Heart of Glass. And basically, WKRP made the band Blondie famous. In Blondie, you have like hits like Titus High, Call Me, One Way or Another, Rapture. I think is that called Rapture? I think that's called. But yeah, and to actually thank the TV series, they actually gave them the golden record of the album Parallel Lines. Also this year, Journey released their first big album. This big album was called Infinity, and Infinity had had two big hits called Lights and Wheel in the Sky. So yeah. Also, Kiss did not release an album for that year. The only album I think they did release was like a live album, which had like a handful of new songs on it. But they came out with 4 solo albums because the band wasn't doing that well, like, I guess, as like a friendship-wise kind of thing. And so they came out all solo albums with Ace Frehley's doing the best, Gene Simmons coming in third, Paul Stanley coming in, Gene Simmons in second, Paul Stanley in third, and Peter Criss in fourth. But all albums all went platinum. So one day, Gene Simmons walks into a bar, and he orders some food. And so he sits down, and a band comes up, start playing, and realizing that they have some kind of potential, he signs them on to a record deal. That band was called Van Halen. And so Van Halen came out in 1978. The first album had songs like Eruption, Girl, You Really Got Me, oh my gosh, Running with the Devil, Jamie's Crying, a lot of big songs. Also that year, the Rolling Stones released another big album called Some Girls, which had songs like Beast of Burden, I think Miss You was another one, and this hit Shattered. Also, the band Toto made their debut that year. Toto is probably most famous for nowadays for singing a song called Africa. And other hits like Hold the Line, stuff like that. We'll talk about them later. Also, The Who released their last album with their drummer Keith Moon called Who Are You, which had the hit Who Are You? Just look it up. And so this would be Keith Moon's last album, because shortly after he would die from a drug overdose after seeing a Buddy Holly biopic. Also, Queen released the album Jazz. And yeah, so 1979 comes, and the Cars released the album Candy-O, which is one of my favorite album covers for reasons. It had songs like oh my gosh. So I had a lot of, it was really popular, and the poster was popular too. It has songs like Let's Go, It's All I Can Do, and I Got a Lot on My Head in The Dangerous Type. Were all big songs off of that album. Also, Journey came out with the album called Evolution. On here it had hits like Lovin', Touchin', and Squeezin'. And that's probably it. I don't think any of the other ones on there were hits. So yeah. So also Kiss came out with the album Dynasty. So Dynasty is that disco album I was kind of talking about. And so this had the biggest hit called I Was Made for Loving You. It's probably still one of the most recognizable songs. And it also had other songs like Dirty Living Charisma, Sure Know Something, 2000 Man. Also, Van Halen came out with Van Halen 2, which have which have a couple big songs, Dance Night Away and Beautiful Girls. Also, the KNACK released the album Get the Knack, which featured the hit song My Shrona. And also this year, Pat Benatar debuted, and she would have a hit in 1979 called Heartbreaker, which is her most famous song. Also, The Clash released the album London Calling, which is a very iconic album cover based off of Elvis's first album. And also, Led Zeppelin released the last album that year. It was the last album because I think the drummer died after drug over. Well, a lot of things happened. One of the band members, the kid, died. Some other guy died that was actually in the band. I don't remember who it was right off of my head. But yeah. And then AC/DC released their last album with Bon Scott called Highway to Hell. He will shortly die after. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. If you have not seen this video, if you have not seen any of the other videos before, why didn't you do it at the beginning? I think I told you guys to watch. If I didn't, I'm sorry. If I missed anything, put it down in the comments below. I would like to know if I got anything wrong. I'm not like those people who do not like being corrected and just hit the report button. I'm not like that. I like being corrected. Because I don't want to say the same false information like 50 times to different people. And yeah. So if I get anything wrong, please tell me. If I forgot anything, please tell me. I would like to know what I forgot. So if I remake this video in the future, and got a bunch of new information, I would like to know. And maybe I can add that stuff in. And also I want to know what was the favorite thing I discussed. If you have any stories or anything, any other additional information to any of the stuff I discussed, I would like to know that too. And yeah, and also so if you have any comments, complaints, questions, answers to the questions being asked, or anything good job, great vid, put down in the comments below. Please leave a like, subscribe, and see you guys in the next video.